Welcome to Smash Fiction, the podcast where we pit two or more fictional characters against one another in a battle of strength, or wits, or starting an entire new highly specific subgenre, but still always being the original and best, and see who would win.
Wow.
I've always said that Joel is the Robert Chambers of MST3K, just as Mike is the H.P. Lovecraft, and Jonah is clearly the August Derleth. I mean, the parallels couldn't be clearer.
That's actually, weirdly accurate.
This week, Joel, Tom Servo and Crow from Mystery Science Theater 3000 versus the King in Yellow. In the not-too-distant future, though it looked like 1992, the evil Dr. Forrester was feeling pretty blue. It happened once or twice that he thought Joel really broke, but the robots always saved him with a well-timed funny joke. Now he'd used up every bad film in the video store, so he begged the lone employee, please, there must be something more. Something more? Said the video store employee. Yes, something more, said Dr. Forrester. The employee, a vacant-eyed 20-something whose name tag just said Kenning, scanned the aisles, ensuring that no one else was currently shopping at No Soap Video. Kenning slunk to the front door, locked it, and flipped the open side in the window to closed. We keep it in a secret back room. The switch is hidden in a place that we knew no one would ever touch. Kenning then put his hand on a copy of Baby Geniuses 2, Super Babies, and attempted to remove it. The film didn't move, but in a faraway, barely lit corner of the store, a section of wall slid away. You really want a film that'll fry your Pop-Tart? Come with me, he said, and Dr. Forrester followed. Way in the back of the store, all the way past the docu-sploitation and the Shakespeare erotica, Kenning and Forrester walked through the newly revealed secret passage down a long winding spiral staircase and finally past a very loud beaded curtain. The section of the store looked similar to the room above, except the walls were black, and instead of fluorescent lights, there was only candlelight. The films were also ones that Forrester had never heard of. Beyond the Gates, Videodrome, Infinite Jest, the Necronomo Laserdisc, and Log Jammin'.
Can I just say real quick that no one ever better try to show me the film adaptation of Infinite Jest. I will hurt you.
The sign on the wall said, Occult Classics. Kenning said, every movie in here is cursed in some way. What you looking for? My personal fave is this one where after you watch it, a little girl kills you in 7 days. No, said Forrester, nothing like that. What we're going for is something that will finally drive Robinson mad as Max, insane as a clown posse. Whoa, said Kenning. I'm an unrepentantly evil cultist. I'm totally cool with taking your money to help you kill a stranger via cursed videotape. But even I have my standards, so I'll advise you to keep an eye on that ableist language you're using. Insanity is not a term with any objective scientific value. It's a social construct, historically often used to persecute those who have just diverged from societal norms in one way or another. So would you mind using some more specific and less problematic language, my dude? What sort of result would you say is the minimum for you to be satisfied with your purchase in this scenario? Thus far, our readings of how much of a toll these films are taking on the psyches of Joel and his robot friends has been inconclusive. Sometimes they do seem to be wearing them down quite a bit, but other times they seem downright chipper. We want something that will definitively traumatize them. Writing eldritch runes on the walls with their own excrement and or motor oil, as the case may be, would obviously be the best case scenario, but even something as minor as at least one of them having recurring nightmares for the rest of their lives, a dark cloud that hangs over them such that they will be unable to return to their life as it previously was. I'd consider that a win, but if all three of them manage to shrug off this movie just the same way they always do, well then, at the very least I'll certainly expect my money back. I've got just the thing, said Kenning. Where is it? Oh, here we are. He dropped a heavy film canister on the counter. We had it under the Squam comms for some reason.
What?
Squamous comedies.
Yeah, I got it.
The King in Yellow, said Forrester, reading the label. The only surviving copy, said Kenning. The last known copy of the play it was based on was burned in the 80s back during Satanic Panic, but in the late 70s when this film was shot, there were still a few copies kicking around. The producers chose it because it was in the public domain, and as far as I know, they just used the script of the play as the shooting script, but they didn't realize at the time that anyone who even reads the script is permanently changed by it, let alone performs in it. most of the cast and crew didn't survive the shooting process, so there were a lot of recasts all throughout it, which, didn't help. Except the DP, he made it. They say he filmed the entire thing while wearing a blindfold so as not to be driven mad by the non-Euclidean mise-en-scène. But because of that, you can sometimes also see the boom mic and some of the close-ups are really out of focus. It's perfect, said Forrester. I'll send the king in yellow. The name alone gives me chills. If this film doesn't drive him mad, then nothing ever will. Will Joel be able to joke through one last film, or will it strip his psyche bare? I have no idea, and that is why I'm your judge and my name is Claire. Advocate roll call. Representing the King in Yellow are Dan Mulcairn.
It is a fearful thing to fall into the hands of the living God. That dude does not practice good hand-washing techniques.
And Kit Mulcairn.
Strange is the night where black stars rise, and strange moons circle through the skies. But stranger still is my opening argument. Get ready, y'all. I'm sorry.
Representing Mystery Science Theater 3000 are Miles Schneiderman and all-star returning guest from the Gameable podcast from Mega Dumbcast, it's Chris Newton.
Ladies and gentlemen, The King in Yellow, Act 1. A balcony of the palace in Hastur, overlooking the Lake of Hali, which stretches to the horizon, blank, motionless, and covered with a thin haze. The two suns sink toward the rippleless surface.
It's Tatooine. Does Disney own this? Is the King in Yellow technically a Disney princess now?
Cassilda, a queen, lies on the couch overlooking the lake, turning in her lap a golden diadem set with jewels. A servant enters and offers her a tray, but it is nearly empty. Some bread, a jug. She looks at it hopelessly and waves it away.
The ennui of truly endless breadsticks.
The servant goes out. Enter Prince Uot, a portly man in his early millions. Uot, good day, mother. Cassilda, goodbye, day.
Mallory Archer in the role she was born to play.
Uot, you have been looking at Carcosa again. Cassilda, no, nobody can see Carcosa before the Hyades rise. I was only looking at the Lake of Hali. It swallows so many suns. Uot, and you will see it swallow so many more. These mists are bad for you. They seep into everything.
I don't like mist. It gets everywhere.
Come inside. Cassilda, no, not now. I am not afraid of a little mist, nor of a little time. I have seen quite a lot of both. Uot, this interminable siege!
And by siege, I mean exposition.
Would that the lake would swallow Alar for once instead of the suns. Cassilda, not even Hali can do that, since Ali sits upon Deme, which is quite another lake.
Ah, the classic dramatic device of lake comparison. Exquisite.
Uot, one lake is like another, water and fog, fog and water. If Hastur and Alar changed sites between moons, nobody would notice. They are the two worst situated cities in the world.
Well, I know somebody who's never had to drive into Los Angeles.
Cassilda, necessarily, for they are
Jesus
the only
Christ,
ones.
you guys.
Uot, except Carcosa. Well, Cassilda, I am not sure, my prince, that Carcosa is in the world. In any event, it is certainly fruitless to talk about the matter.
A play so dull it bores itself.
Wow.
That's a record. That has to be, right?
That was an attack upon my sanity.
Time for the kid thanks. So,
Seriously.
I mean, we've done, musical theater and singers before.
yes,
so-
y'all really trying to steal Claire's diadem, aren't you?
I mean, I think we just snatched it.
Yeah, you did.
It is worthless and made of brass, I assure you. If you're wondering who goes first this week, there's only one method I will allow. I picked a number between 1 and 1,000,000. Each team gets one guess, so say it right now.
666, obviously.
666,666.
The mystery number picked was 3,000.
Of course.
So I guess that means Team MST3K is going to go first for your opening arguments. Team MST3K, you've got yellow sign.
Your Honor, when we talk about the King in Yellow, we're diving into suspiciously murky waters. Cloying mists of vague and contradictory source material rise above this lake of, Lee? A fiendish pool infested with the squid monsters of unreliable narration who worship at the confusing altar of the great evil whose name is wait, what the fuck actually happened in that passage? Our opposition will doubtless attempt to use this to their advantage, but unlike them, I have found the yelling sign, and it has granted me both increased vocal volume and clarity of vision. I have seen the truth, and the truth is that the only common thread linking every incarnation of the King in Yellow is the specific type of person whom it affects. First of all, the King in Yellow tends to do its greatest damage to people who are already insane and or immoral. Hildred Castaigne from The Repairer of Reputations is the victim of a head injury which completely changed his personality, and as a result he spent several years in a late 19th century asylum. A late 19th century asylum! No wonder dude thinks he's living in the United States of Kevorkian. The nameless protagonist of In the Court of the Dragon is a murderer haunted by guilt. Jack Scott is a self-described immoral person, and the unnamed main character of The River of Night's Dreaming is a schizophrenic and possibly homicidal mental patient and asylum inmate. All of these characters have serious issues dating back to long before they encountered the King in Yellow, issues that Joel and the bots do not share. Second, like many Lovecraftian influences, the King in Yellow tends to affect artists, and I don't mean just any creative type. There's a very specific kind of artist who tends to be mentally affected in these stories, as well as those of Lovecraft and others. They are the psychologically sensitive, those who feel deeply and express their feelings through art, capturing the unique and poignant elements of the human condition via late-night philosophy and bad poetry. In other words, goths. The King in Yellow affects goths. Both Jack Scott and Alec are painters, Boris Yvain is a sculptor, and even the unnamed killer in Dragon is an architect. More importantly, they all exhibit the supremely gothy worldview of your typical Lovecraftian artist protagonist, and while the MST3K crew might frequently fuck around with inventions and, arts and crafts, they are neither gothy nor your typical Lovecraftian protagonists. Third, almost everyone affected by the King in Yellow is pushed over the edge via romantic or sexual desire. Hildred's delusion is informed by his jealousy of his cousin, who is favored by the object of Hildred's affection, Constance Hawberk. The Mask is a story about the love triangle between Alec, Boris, and Genevieve. In The Yellow Sign, the shit doesn't really hit the fan until Scott and Tessie kiss, and whatever is happening to Cassilda in The River of Night's Dreaming is extremely sexual, to the point that she literally encounters a penis monster. Sex and romance are near constant catalysts for the madness of the play's victims, but ironically, you will find neither on the Satellite of Love. There's also the fact that all these characters are somehow connected. Jack Scott mentions that he knew Hildred in The Yellow Sign, and Hildred specifically refers to Boris in Repairer. All the named characters in The River of Night's Dreaming are direct callbacks to either the King in Yellow or characters from Repairer, and while Dreaming is very open to interpretation, it's no accident the copy of the play read by our protagonist once belonged to Constance Castaigne, or that both the narrator and Hildred were treated by psychiatrists named Dr. Archer. The dude from Dragon is the only one we can't trace directly to the circle of people, but we know he lived in Paris among artists at about the right time, so it's not the biggest stretch to suspect he might have been acquainted with the Parisian artist trio from The Mask. If the King in Yellow is so dangerous to anyone reading it, why does it seem to focus so heavily on a specific group of people? The answer can be found in the overarching Lovecraftian idea that no matter what you think you know, there is a darkness beneath the surface of the world, and some people are destined to be consumed by it. Lovecraftian heroes often discover that they have always been part of the darkness, that there is no way for them to escape the fate that has been with them since birth. All the people I've mentioned here were doomed from the start, and not because they happened to stumble across the King in Yellow. The play came to them because of who they were. Jack Scott encounters the zombie watchman, Tessie finds the Yellow Sign, and both of them have dark and terrible dreams that end up coming true, all before the King in Yellow appears on the shelf. Neither of them had read it before. The King in Yellow didn't cause the man in Dragon to kill someone, nor did it cause the woman in Dreaming to be sent to the asylum. Certainly none of them were better off for reading the play, but there's no direct corollary between reading The King in Yellow and losing your mind. Quite the opposite, in fact. Alec is the only person seen reading the book in The Mask, but he doesn't go insane. Scott and Tessie stay up all night talking about the King in Yellow in hushed, fearful tones, but I did the same thing the first time I saw What the Bleep Do We Know? It's not that weird. Hildred may be delusional about living in the fascist future of 1920, but we do know from the Yellow Sign that he didn't dream up the book being widespread. So if it is as infamous as Chambers makes it out to be, why is a good portion of the world not losing their minds? As always with Lovecraft, it's because it only affects a certain kind of person. In the Call of Cthulhu adventure Tatters of the King, the PCs sit through an actual production of The King in Yellow, an event which inflicts a paltry 1d6 sanity damage and 0 if you make your save, driving 9 NPCs in an audience of 100 temporarily insane. That might seem low, but when you consider that the play really only affects cliques of mentally fragile, morally dubious, sexually repressed goth fuckboys, then yeah, 9% of a theater audience sounds about right.
For two stories with opposite genres, MST3K and The King in Yellow have a similar theme. People look into the abyss through art and have their sanity tested. In MST3K, resilient people look into the abyss and survive. Comedy. In The King in Yellow stories, vulnerable people look into the abyss and go mad. Horror. The difference is the people. While our adversaries tonight are bringing the abyss, we're bringing the people. And unlike the troubled Parisian ponces Miles has just described, our guys know how to face the darkness without doing a cannonball into it. Joel Robinson is a janitor whose boss trapped him in space to torture him with bad movies. You may ask whether that's really torture. It is. I confirmed it myself by unwisely reading some extremely depressing psychological studies about solitary confinement, space madness, etc. I learned two things. Number one, life is bad. It's a mistake. Number two, the isolation, confinement, and coercion Joel endures could destroy a person. The absurdity of suffering all that for awful movies just adds a fuck everything icing to the fuck you cake. Fortunately, a few traits are proven to make people resilient to this trauma. Likeability, emotional moderation, patience, tolerance, confidence without egotism, a team approach, sense of humor, being easily entertained, technical competence. That is the real-life profile for extreme trauma resilience, and it couldn't be more Joel unless it also specified red jumpsuit and looks baked. When Joel got to the SOL, he fought back immediately, building Tom Servo and Crow to mock the movies with him. Riffing has kept Joel and the bots sane on the satellite of love for years, in conditions that would break a normal person in maybe 6 months. How? Science again. A 2004 meta-study found that humor is a strong tactic for dealing with trauma. Riffing will be extra effective against The King in Yellow because we see repeatedly that you've got to consume the whole play for its delicate spell to take hold. Riffing will obscure the dialogue and distract from the plot. Let's talk bots. Tom Servo, first of all, is not even playing on a human level. When he reads Lovecraft, he probably relates more to the tentacler than the tentacly. When the crew runs into a Star Trek-style race of godlike beings, they recruit Tom based on his IQ. Tom groks quantum physics so deeply he can teleport. There are things man was not meant to know, but that's man's problem, man. Servo will no more go mad from that stuff than Amigo or an Elder Thing would. He's on that level. As for Crow, goddamn. Tortured for years, achieved total enlightenment, turned to pure energy, turned physical again, lived alone for centuries, then thrown back into torture. If that can't turn Crow into a nihilist, a 2-act play about fin de siècle ennui is not going to do it. Now, The King in Yellow isn't just a disturbing play, it comes with paranormal hijinks, but they are nothing next to the nonsense freak parade that is life on the SOL. What's actually supernatural in Chambers' stories? A potion that turns things to marble. A book appearing on a shelf, oh god, the terror. And, climactically, one zombie who gets his finger pinched off by accident. That's it. Behind all the smoke and mirrors, the ultimate horror is a zombie who's just like a regular guy, except you could pull him apart like monkey bread. Meanwhile, in space, Joel's getting visits from giants, from demon dogs. Hell, the bots summon Mothra, which is not a thing non-fairy, non-twin people can normally do, and they show no fear of Mothra, who's a lot like the King in Yellow. Supposedly impressive, but really just a shabby-looking yellow heap who appears for a few big scenes in fiction that hurts to watch.
How dare you speak of Mothra this way? Good day, sir.
I should have known we'd be riffing each other's arguments during this.
Dark forces have invaded the SOL before, too. In Fire Maidens of Outer Space, a very creepy, robotic, quote, dark specter appears, sowing distrust and ultimately attacking the bots. Does the crew panic or lose hope when they're attacked in the theater? No. Joel wrestles the specter and forces it out the airlock. If Joel can keep calm and overpower a molybdenum demon bot, he can handle a single zombie who's the consistency of really good ribs. So what if that zombie is an embodiment of death? Our guys have met one of those too. A soul taker, an agent of the afterlife, comes for Joel because it's his time, and Joel just fucking books it in a spaceship of his own design. Because Joel would not stop for death, he's still alive and has a spaceship. Bad poem, huge balls. This match will go down just like an MST3K episode because it follows the MST3K formula. Dr. F sends a movie to drive our heroes mad. They tear it apart. Push the button, roll credits. But this match breaks the formula of King in Yellow stories. Those stories almost to a one are about fragile people who read the play and see a horror they can't unsee. Joel and the bots aren't fragile. They've faced equal despair and greater weirdness. Just like the few other sane audiences we've seen consume the play, our heroes will stay sane. The King in Yellow sticks to the weak-minded. I therefore move that my opponents concede now, so we can all spend the rest of this episode discussing how fucked TV's Frank is.
I second the motion.
Very well done, Team MST3K. Team King in Yellow. Du hast. Do Haster and the King in Yellow constitute two aspects of the same being, or are they separate entities altogether? I was never clear on that.
I haven't felt well since I began reading The King in Yellow, so I apologize if my opening argument is a quick one. In the not too distant future, next Sunday A.D., I think it was, there was a guy named Joel who was forced to watch a filmed version of the accursed play, The King in Yellow. I'm sure you've already heard of it by now, or else I would never have clued you into its existence and rob you of the blissful ignorance that had kept us safe. But if you truly have never heard of this infamous play before, stop listening. Delete this episode, delete this podcast from your feed, whatever it takes to keep your morbid curiosity from taking you down a path from which you cannot return.
Man, you guys really should have picked a number closer to 3,000 if you wanted to give this warning.
As you already know, when the French government seized the translated copies that arrived in Paris, that only made the Londoners want it more. And then it spread. Like an infectious disease, the King in Yellow spread from city to city, continent to continent, confiscated, banned, denounced by even the literary anarchists that had not yet read the beautiful, terrible, irresistible truth in its pages. So it isn't very strange, I suppose, that the play found its way into space. Joel was being tortured by his bosses via being forced to watch very bad movies. Unfortunately, he can't control when the movies begin or end because he used those special parts to make his robot friends, namely Tom Servo and Crow. Perhaps even more unfortunate, these robots appear to have sentience and reason on par with that of humans, and so are able to suffer from these terrible movies to an often worse degree than Joel. If they were just able to stop watching before getting to the second act, they might have been fine. The first act is boring, banal, but just a glance at the first few words of the second act is enough to strike a blow from which no man or man-like robot has ever been able to recover. I can speak from experience. I am aware that this is anecdotal evidence I'm bringing to the court, but I apologize, Your Honor. Their attention will become riveted to the play. They would snatch the play from a fire in order to continue reading. They would plot to overthrow the government for the King in Yellow. They would arrange the assassination of someone they love or just really horny for. All for the king whom emperors have served. That is the hold that these horrible, stupendous words have on the psyche. Words understood by the ignorant and wise alike. Words more soothing than music, more awful than death. How well will these minds fare when they've already been so weakened by Monster A Go-Go and Santa Claus Conquers the Martians? So masterful is this supreme note of art that human nature cannot bear the strain. Reading the play has immediate mental repercussions ranging from being thrown into a catatonic state to suicidal depression. Even reading a small part of the play can cause one to become physically ill to the point of being bedridden for days, as I've been. And if you think that being artificial will prevent the robots from being afflicted by the play, keep in mind, these robots have food allergies. I fear for them. On top of it all, this weakened physical state leaves all who've been enlightened of Dim Carcosa open to visits. Pale, undead servants of the king will come for those who know. And what they come for, I don't know, but they will hunt Joel and the robots in their dreams night after night until what? Till we're murdered? Until we take our own lives? Till we're raptured to Carcosa? I don't know. But my greatest fear is that any one of them, if Joel, Tom, or Crow survive, I fear they'll be driven to broadcast that episode to the world. Let all the fans of the Satellite of Love, whose minds have already been softened by terrible films, see those black stars hanging in the heavens, the pallid mask, the... No!
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and step in here while Kit gets the lunacy out of her system. Now, I know what sorts of arguments I'd be pitching were I on the other side of this match. The very first story featuring the King in Yellow is notorious for having an unreliable narrator. How can we possibly know that the play has the level of supernatural impact that he claims it does when we have to second guess everything that he says? In fact, most of the people that read and are affected by the play in the first place are those who have pre-existing mental conditions. Hildred from Repairer sustained a head injury years earlier. Genevieve from The Mask seems to have bipolar depression. Mr. Scott from The Yellow Sign decided that he could reasonably make a living as an artist. Isn't it possible that this play only affects those who already sport some type of psychological disorder, but that someone with a healthy mental state wouldn't be lastingly affected by it? Let's be clear here. Joel and the Bots are far from the picture of mental health. MST3K is a comedy, meaning that the character's emotional experiences tend to be larger than those of a normal person. That's what makes it comedic. So a boring moment in a movie that would elicit a sigh and a yawn from a normal audience member results in the characters screaming at the screen. A film with a weird-looking character or an unusual soundtrack leads to a host segment where the characters grapple with questions of their own identity. This is especially true of Crow, who thought he was a bear after watching Jack Frost, thought he was Mary Tyler Moore after It Lives by Night, and became convinced he was a psychic alien woman while watching Space Mutiny. That last segment is particularly relevant, as Crow himself admitted that his identity is so flimsy and easily influenced that he'll eagerly grab on to whatever offers him the barest suggestion of a deeper truth. A richer soil for the twisting messages of the King in Yellow you will not find. He even shares a color with the titular king, and would probably be convinced that his lacrosse face mask headpiece was actually a crown. The so-called Mads decide to test the limits of human sanity in a pretty ineffective way. They force Joel and his robot friends to watch bad movie after bad movie. Obviously, there are more reliable, documented ways of destroying a person's sanity. Roger Ebert would certainly attest to the fact that a person can go their entire lives digesting a huge quantity of bottom-of-the-barrel cinema and be largely fine. But of course, the weird part about MST3K is that, on many occasions, this awful plan works. There are numerous times when Joel and his robots are pushed to the very brink of snapping due to these poorly made films. We've seen the bots almost completely lose their minds trying to analyze the lyrics of the Pina Colada song. Both of them are nearly driven to suicide after Monster A Go-Go. Tom and Crow repeatedly beg Mike to kill them during The Wild World of Batwoman. Tom even starts repeatedly screaming for it to end in the last few minutes. All three of them break down and wonder if there will be light in the world ever again when they're halfway through Invasion of the Neptune Men. They have to be pulled out of their despair by the villain Crankor from Prince of Space and subsequently break into tears when he leaves. After watching Star Crash, the bots recreate the final fight scene to such an extent that Kenya and Max wonder if they've broken them. Tom starts shrieking in anger when the title character of Mitchell gets into an argument with a kid. Later in that episode, when Joel leaves on an escape pod, the bots freak out so much that Crow literally falls into pieces. I could go on, but the truth is that none of these guys deal with stress well, and all of them have a lot of baggage coming into this. Crow admits in Monster A Go-Go that he often panics while making sandwiches. Tom has a massive mental breakdown after a 2-minute who's on first style conversation about Japanese no theater in Invasion of the Neptune Men. Even Joel, calm, sedate Joel, is not starting from a place of complete mental stability, given that he at one point had Crow dress as Judy Garland and sing show tunes to him all night. The types of bad films that the SOL crew watch tend to fall into one of a few different categories: slow and boring, nonsensical and absurd, poorly shot and badly acted. The sanity-shaking horror of The King in Yellow comes from none of these things. Their admittedly impressive experience watching incompetently crafted films has no bearing on their ability to resist the horrific revelations of this particular Carcosan play. All it will take for this to be a victory for us is for just one of these guys to be deeply, permanently affected by this play. And let me tell you something. The guys who could barely handle the Beast of Yucca Flats is in no shape to take on the King in Yellow.
Great job, Team King in Yellow. You know, I don't care what anyone else says. I don't think you're dumb at all. I think both of you are real deep ones.
Oh, jeez.
Now it's time for rebuttals. Team MST3K, time to make fun of all the poor writing, cheap effects, and plot holes in your opponent's opening arguments.
Kit, you mentioned that nobody comes back.
What?
Take your time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was having a soft shell crab dream.
You mentioned that nobody comes back from the second act. This is patently untrue. In the story More Light, the narrator does just that. He reads the entire thing down to the last word and suffers no permanent ill effects afterward and seems clearly to be able to like pull himself away. He doesn't because he's interested, but like it's not sucking him in.
Well, the More Light version of the play is really a tricky one to touch on because, like, first of all, there's real heavy implications in that story that version was written by Bill Atheling, so not by, like, Robert Chambers or by anyone supernatural. But, you know, even if you accept that, there are, like, supernatural manifestations as the narrator is reading the play, power flickering and such, which I feel like would be a little bit of a disaster in a poorly put together satellite like the SOL. The other person that we see read that play in More Light is Atheling himself, who is like severely sickly, super underweight, and has been stricken blind. So I feel like if you're rolling the dice based on that version of the play, you still don't have great odds.
I want to make it really clear that it's not enough to just be insane. Like, I don't think that Joel and the bots are insane in the way you described, Dan, but every character in the source material who was affected by the King in Yellow, which is not all of them, but all the ones who were, have at least 2 out of the 3 of insanity or immorality, being a goth artist fuckboy, or having like sexual hangups. Even if you think that Joel and the bots are already mentally fragile, that's only one of the things that we've seen as a prerequisite for being affected by the King in Yellow.
I mean, have you seen the number of times that like Crow and Servo have almost made out with each other? Those are some pretty intense sexual hangups. Like, you know that Gypsy is occupying a pretty large amount of mental real estate in Crow and Servo's heads at any given time.
That is pure speculation, sir. And also, speaking of pure speculation, Kit mentioned that the play is powerful enough to leave people like bedridden for days with illness. There's actually no evidence whatsoever to suggest that what you're describing, the occurrences of the mask, had anything to do with the King in Yellow. The first person who goes down with a fever, Genevieve, we never see her or hear about her reading the King in Yellow. Alec, like, pages through it. It's very strongly implied that he's read the book before. There's no evidence that anyone in the mask was driven to insanity by the King in Yellow.
But there are multiple characters? Or was that me? There are multiple characters in the chambers as the King in Yellow that describe that they've been reading it and they've been ill, and then it happens to the painter me, right? No, the sculptor me. He also
we don't know that the sculptor was reading it.
And we did read it. It says that
I appreciate this, but I'm trying to like take notes, so this is making it very difficult. So can you please?
Alec me picked up the book in the book, and he was reading it, and all he did was page through it. He didn't get very far, and then he falls ill for like a long ass time, long enough for Boris and Genevieve to basically become a statue. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what I'm saying.
Literally everything that happens in that story can be explained by the interpersonal relationships. Genevieve goes crazy because she's harboring a secret love for Alec, but she like is with Boris and wouldn't tell Alec that she loves him. Boris goes crazy because his weird like turning shit into like stone solution is what killed the woman that he loved, and he shoots himself. And Alec, again, is totally fine. Like, he comes out. Remember, we are arguing about permanent, like at least some long-term effects here. Alec goes into it, like, has a fever, he's sick for a little while, and he's good.
He didn't read very far into it.
But he references the last lines of the first act, so it is implied that he did get into it.
We have to make a distinction, as Claire did in the opening, between like what could be, characterized as crazy in the sense of like any kind of mental disorder versus what this scenario calls for. Pretty much everything Dan called out, like extreme emotionality. Like in the theater, they're making jokes, like they're yelling at a movie to end. It's what you do when you're sitting around with your friends, right? They're trying to be funny. Likewise, Crow's thing where he like takes on people's personalities. First of all, that's a different Crow with a different personality after like centuries in isolation. So I think that's not really on the table. But even so, all of these things are resolved usually between segments. We're talking about a matter of like less than 5 minutes, it's resolved. So the fact that someone occasionally has anxiety when they're making a sandwich, maybe they've got anxiety. That doesn't mean that they're going to be smearing the walls with feces, right? Those things aren't really connected. And that's important because the people that we see in the plays have deep problems that lend themselves to being picked away at by the play. Joel and the bots are regular people who may have mental quirks and may sometimes be angry at being tortured, God forbid, but they're not like that.
I think that you are overestimating the degree to which their skill at riffing on movies will help them through this. Typically when they riff on movies, it's because like something absurd or silly or boring is happening and they're just sort of like trying to fill the awkwardness. The thing about The King in Yellow that's very consistent throughout most of its depictions is that it's intensely compelling. And I think that you need a certain degree of distance from yourself in the work if you're going to be riffing on it and therefore distracting yourself from it. And I think that The King in Yellow is just so unlike any of these other movies that they riff on because they're just bad. Like The King in Yellow is not just bad, it is otherworldly in terms of what it portrays. And I think that their usual tactics will be either ineffective or just won't be able to be used at all.
Well done, Team MST3K. Team King in Yellow. Look at the stars. They shine in black for you. They'll turn your brain to goo. And it was all yellow.
Chris brought up the fact that Tom Servo is so connected to the universe and has so much knowledge about like super science that he's able to teleport, as we see. And I think it's the Gunslingers that happens in.
The more you know, the worse it is.
I mean, that's the thing, is that like time after time in Lovecraft and in all of his contemporaries, we see that the only real defense from threats like the King in Yellow is ignorance. Like, if anything, Tom will be all the more vulnerable due to his knowledge.
No, as I said in the opening argument, in fact, in Lovecraft, you don't see Migo driving elder things insane. These creatures who understand things on this level, their minds can't be broken because their minds already get it. They already see the universe that way. And that's what we're seeing with Tom. If, in fact, he were gonna go insane more easily because his mind works in that level, maybe the years of torture would have already done it. But they haven't because he's operating on a whole different level.
So by your argument, Miles, that The King in Yellow, the play, comes to those that it deems the correct type of person, which I think is a stretch, but this whole show is a stretch. Everyone, just delete this podcast for your sanity. The fact that it comes to the correct type of person, then the fact that it found its way into space, onto the satellite of love, is pretty damning, isn't it? Mon ami.
My argument was not so much that, like, The King in Yellow has, like, a police radio and is, like, looking around for people who it deems appropriate and then, like, walks over there. The people that show up in Chamber stories in the River of Night Streaming are all people who already have some kind of connection to darkness. And the fact that they are so linked together, all the characters affected by this are so thoroughly linked, is evidence to the fact that these are already people who were gonna get got by Lovecraftian shit. It's not so much that, like, the King in Yellow seeks out these people, it's just that they're more likely to encounter things like the King in Yellow because of who they are.
How do you not know that Joel and the robots are not linked, you know?
I know because there's a profile, there's a type of person, as you pointed out in your opening, Miles, and it's very consistent. It's people who are on that edge about to fall into darkness, right? Like, that's what the play opens you up to. It's chaos, it's nihilism, it's decadence. As you said, Kit, it's like a disease. Not everyone catches it, right? Like, that's not how you win as a disease. It's vulnerable populations. It is everywhere. We know from the stories. It's in bookstores. It's around. It was a huge literary craze. The reason that all of London isn't insane is because everybody thumbed through it. Probably everybody heard about it in the news, but a small group of people who are close to the edge, it caught.
First of all, of course they've been exposed to darkness. They watched Monster A Go-Go. I watched Monster A Go-Go. Look at me. God. Second of all, Hildred said that it was widely banned. Enough people read it and lost their shit that it got banned and pulled in time. Granted, you're still going to have people black market trying to read it and shit. Or then you get people like, what's his face in The Yellow Sign, who's like, Tessie, no, because he knows. He knows what's up.
Hildred does say that. Hildred's also fucking crazy. I don't know that I've ever met a less reliable narrator in a work of fiction. But barring that, he says it's widely banned, sure, but like all these other characters have access to it. I mean, Dan, you were talking earlier about like how the King in Yellow is so compelling that you like can't put it down. Dude, Alec in the Mask just like fucking picks it up and starts like skimming through it and puts it down. It's not all that compelling, and if it has been banned, it hasn't been banned very well because all these characters get their hands on a copy.
I mean, drugs are banned and yet, but what we said was that the book is not put downable once you read the first few words of the second act, because that's what is established in Chambers' is the King in Yellow.
And yet Chambers says people dare not speak of the contents of the second act in public. That really implies that all these people know what's in the second act. but they dare not speak about it. If we're having people passing on the street who dare not talk to each other about the second act, the fact that they're not all crazy is strong evidence that this play can't work the way you're saying it does.
Also, you know what's going to really help with dealing with the second act of this play? Fucking riffing on the first act until you can't take anything seriously anymore. That's going to put up a little barrier between you and the second.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's also been said by the readers that it's the first freaking act that like lures you into this false sense of security.
Because it's boring?
Yeah, it's banal. Just like Monster A Go-Go.
Geez, I don't know if I have enough facts here yet. There's so much to sort through. This is going to be really hard, guys.
Facts will do you no good in this one, Claire.
You know, they say that the first half of an episode of Smash Fiction is fairly normal, but the very banality and innocence of the first act only allows the blow to fall afterwards with more awful effect. It's the lightning round!
Take
I
me,
have
Jesus.
seen the lightning round.
Returning from a commercial break, Joel and friends find themselves a couple scenes into Act 2, and although the first half of the movie was a real laugh riot, now the jokes have started to get a little less frequent. Despite the atrocious acting and shoestring special effects, the underlying narrative of this film is resonating with them in a way that they can't quite put their finger on. And although Joel is doing his best to poke fun at it, in all honesty, he feels a pit in his stomach that's unlike anything he's ever felt before. He feels connected to something, like there was a fourth person in the theater sitting right behind them. Then, just as the masquerade ball on the edge of Lake Hali was getting good, there was an extended close-up of the stranger's masked face, and Crow was right in the middle of saying how he liked to give himself the stranger every now and again, too. But the film suddenly stopped dead on a frame. A moment later, as happens when you have an old film like this that gets caught in the projector, the film burst into flames. Forrester rushed to put out the fire, but it was too late. The last known copy of The King in Yellow, in any form, was destroyed.
Sweet, we win.
Tom Servo and Crow leapt as high into the air as their weird little robot bodies would allow. Hooray, they cheered, we're free! But Joel didn't feel free at all. That other presence was still there with them, and he knew what it was thinking. No, said Joel, this is just gonna piss him off. And he was right. Far away on distant Carcosa, the King in Yellow sensed that his last foothold on Earth had been destroyed, and he needed to come back with something new, a new version of his mind-controlling story to mesmerize the Earthling masses. However, the King in Yellow is not above modifying his story to match the tastes of a changing demographic. He knows that obviously no one watches movies anymore, or reads plays for that matter. As we all know, in the distant future of next Sunday A.D., just as it is in the real world, the things that all the kids are obsessed with nowadays is... Guessing? Anyone, any guesses?
Vines? TikTok?
Dating sims.
Oh, all right.
Is that really? Okay.
The King in Yellow decides that the best medium in which to release his timeless tale is as a cosmic horror-themed dating sim. But Joel, with his newfound connection to the mind of the King in Yellow, senses his plan and decides to cut him off at the pass. He is going to use all his inventing expertise and whatever spare parts he can find lying around to make a dating sim video game of his own. Maybe if he can make his game a hit, everyone will play that instead of the King in Yellow's game.
Oh my god,
and Joel
I'm so sick of
decides
video
to take
game
that
crap.
old adage of write what you know to heart and sets his game in a world that he knows all too well, the world of Gizmonic Institute, Castle Forrester, and the Satellite of Love. Advocates, what is the name of the dating sim you're creating? Who is the protagonist? And who are the different people you can date? For the King in Yellow, these can be any cosmic horror entities from the works of Chambers or any other horror writer who followed in his footsteps. And for MST3K, these are your choice of hosts, robots, and bad guys from across all three eras of the show. What are some dates you can go on? What are some of the unique mechanics that you're bringing to the world of dating sims for the first time? Whatever part of this you want to spend your time on, go for it. You do not have to hit all these points. Follow your muse.
I'm going to be honest with you, I've never played a dating sim, so I don't know anything about them.
Okay, this wouldn't be like a filthy hentai dating sim, right?
I mean, yeah.
That's
Dealer's choice, I guess.
Yeah, it's one of the
I was
genres.
leaning a little away from that, but you can imply like things get spicy, I guess. I don't want it to be like balls to the wall, filthy
Oh shit,
all
that was the
throughout,
title.
probably.
Damn it.
Team MST3K went first during the regular round, so Team King in Yellow will be going first in the lightning round. Team King in Yellow. Roses are red, the stars are all black. The king is in yellow. Do you like him back?
Yes, no, or maybe. Our dating sim is called Removing the Mask, and it takes place in Carcosa High School.
The protagonist is the Stranger. The Stranger is a second-year transfer student. They have a dark secret, though, as they are, throughout the course of the game, going to be working against the principal of Carcosa High, which is the King in Yellow.
There are 3 major characters that you can date in this game. There's Cassilda. She's your longtime friend. You know, you grew up next door to her. She's very happy that now you're going to her school. You know, you've transferred in so you guys can get to know each other again.
Yeah, you often see her as a friend, but, over the course of the game, maybe, yeah, she's kind of cute. Never thought about her that way.
Yeah.
But hey.
Oh, Kit, actually, no, we need to change those.
No, we don't. I thought about it.
Okay. All right.
Okay, listen, I'll give you my explanation. Look, okay, and Camilla... She's the tsundere, hot chick senpai. She's kind of bitchy. She, pretends like she doesn't like you, but she fucking does. The reason why I chose Camilla is because in this little snippet in The Mask, the first thing she's like, you, sir, should unmask. And I was like, isn't that a chingona fucking thing to say to somebody?
Okay, all right. No, you've convinced me. Yep, Camilla's our tsundere. And the third person you can date is Neotalba, who is the student council president and also lead cleric of Carcosa High.
I'm going to go ahead and advocate for some separation of church and state here.
Well, look, man, Carcosa High is very backwards in a lot of ways.
Separation of church and student government?
Yeah, no, it's a religious school. Don't worry about it. They get exemptions. It's fine.
Yeah.
Is it private?
Yeah.
Are taxpayer dollars funding the school?
Well, it's private, but they're working on, getting everybody to join.
Yeah, that's right. They have a lot of very compelling literature that they send out.
They have an aggressive recruitment program.
So there's a few dates you can go on. There's a big masquerade prom at the end of the year. You can go on a boat ride on the Lake of Hali.
Romantic.
There's a big soccer game against the rival school, Alar High. It's just this ongoing thing between the two of them.
In addition to pursuing your dates, making sure you're saying the right things, you're picking up on the things they like, you're telling them what they want to hear. In addition to all that, you're also trying to prepare for the arrival of the King in Yellow, your evil principal. And of course, nothing you do matters, and you always die horribly at the end. But hey, maybe you'll get a smooch from the chick of your choice, right?
Yeah, so there you go. That's Removing the Mask, the King in Yellow dating sim.
Very well done, Team King in Yellow. Team MST3K. Bonus points if I can date mad scientist Felicia Day.
I'm afraid you're going to be disappointed. So our game is called Let's Be Frank.
Oh, let's not. Please don't make me be Frank.
No, you're going to be Frank. You're going to be TV's Frank. You got to figure out how to get Frank some love. You know what? Video games are meant to be challenging, damn it.
Yes. This is the Dark Souls of dating sims. You're goddamn Frank.
Yes.
A lot of this takes place in Gizmonic Institute. You're playing Frank. You don't have a lot of agency in your job. You're just kind of a henchman, but you get to make the little choices about exactly which movie gets sent which week. Obviously, Dr. F has Frank really make the inventions for the invention exchanges. That's why they're so stupid. So you get these little things. And you're working with all these people who theoretically your job is to torture them, but really you're just being bossed around like they are. So, you develop these little things. Plus, obviously, Frank is really into Dr. F, right? Everyone understands that.
Yeah, and he's the best friend character.
Yes, exactly. Here's what I think, though. Dr. F obviously hates Frank. However, Frank does not care, and all the dialogue options for Frank are as though he were your lifelong best friend, even though he never reciprocates. But yeah, so you could wander around Gizmonic, go to the cafeteria, all that stuff, meet people, choose the janitor or whatever you want to send to space. In some instances, whenever you need to replace a test subject, you can pick somebody out, send them up.
This is also just sort of like a mad scientist sim on top of being a dating sim.
I mean, look, double the value.
Oh no, I'm all about this, man.
And this brings us to the unique mechanic, which is that this is a dating sim with a crafting system, because you have to get technology to build the invention exchanges. But then, in addition to impressing the person of your choice with your invention, you can also use it to achieve different things. Like, for example, there's one gadget that swaps your consciousness with another member of your bloodline so that you can switch bodies with TV's son of TV's Frank and date Kinga. Surprise, Claire.
Oh!
Yeah, we did it.
We took you on a journey through time and space. So there's all these different inventions that impress different people. And you've got your whole cast of people, right? Crow is the mean one, obviously. He's the most acerbic, the most sarcastic, the least likely to date Frank.
I mean, Dr. F is also the mean one, but
when you're TV's Frank, they're all the mean one. That's your life.
That's right.
The popular girl is Tom, right? He comes out strutting his stuff in one of his many lovely dresses, one of my favorite parts of MST3K. And you got to woo Tom, sometimes he's a Southern lady, sometimes he's a cheerleader. These are real actual things about Tom Servo. do you want to talk a little, Miles, about the other secret character in addition to Kinga?
Yeah, I would love to. So there's actually a piano in Gizmonic that at first glance doesn't appear to have any mechanical function within the game. You can just like randomly play music on the piano, right? But if you happen to play a little song that goes something like this, Gamera,
Oh shit.
Gamera, then you can in fact date Gamera.
Oh, man.
The Godzilla knockoff space turtle. That
You mean the one who's friend to all the children?
He's friend of the children, that's right. And if you can unlock Gamera, then he will fly you to another planet where, let's be frank, immediately turns into a filthy hentai sim. But that's not the point.
Frank. Oh god.
I got some dialogue for you. Are you full of meat? Would you like to be?
Oh,
And with that,
Oh, boy.
you know, I thought I had lost my sanity before.
Yeah, let's do MST3K versus that dating sim that you guys just came up with.
well, this is embarrassing. I've just been told that I'm an unreliable narrator, and that large portions of this episode actually took place entirely within my own head. In order to fix this problem, I'm going to take off, and in a few minutes, Mike Nelson's going to come onto the mic, and he's going to be and he's going to take my place on Smash Fiction moving forward.
Tell him he can't.
Sorry.
Tell him he
yeah,
sucks and I hate him.
He's going to be the one to deliver the final verdict. So, bye!
Oh, boy.
Fucking Mike Nelson.
Chris, I have to thank you. You were the one who brought this amazing idea to Smash Fiction.
Yeah, dude.
And
We're getting to kick thanks early, but man.
yes,
What a great idea.
I remember like a few weeks ago when we were discussing having you on the show, you presented to us a list of your ideas. And when we got to this match idea, there was a dead stop as all of us were like, no, we have to do that one. It's obvious. We have to do this one. So
Yeah.
that is entirely on you, sir. And we thank you for that.
I think it turned out well. I hope it lived up to the hype. I know that I certainly destroyed myself researching for this episode. This is my last gasp. I'm going to walk away from the microphone, take like 5 steps and fall over after this. So I'm glad you liked it.
I think I'm probably gonna cut the shit in the middle where we're arguing about fucking Towers of the King, but good lord, the process of figuring out what the fuck is actually canon for the King in Yellow is a daunting one.
Yeah, ain't it just though? Ain't it just? I didn't even get to some of the side stories like the 7th day the Yellow God rests, where there's an organization built to find and destroy every copy of the King in Yellow. Like, I didn't even touch on that stuff.
I was expecting it, and I noticed you didn't touch on that because you said you were going to use that one, and we were like, wait, what the fuck is this?
It was more that I had referenced it and I had it in my back pocket in case the occasion came up, but
Except for the fact that you haven't read it, because none of us have read it, because it's from an obscure little British, like, zine that no longer exists.
yeah, I mean, the zine no longer exists. You can order it and have it shipped to the United States for like $25, but you know.
Well, I couldn't get my hands on that, but I did go and track down the whole series that it's from, the Yellow Cross, and I found the latest novella that they released, and I went and checked that out. I did an awful lot of research worrying about the 7th day, only to discover that you would basically be arguing from what you learned in a wiki stub, and I was angry. So I'm glad that did not come up.
Chris, you have to tell them your rebuttal to 7th Day, though, because I'm a little bit sad you didn't get to use it.
Okay, I wasn't operating under the impression that we were going to like vet all our sources, so I like watched and read everything. Like I watched True Detective, I read like Delta Green, the Call of Cthulhu RPG, everything. So I have all these sources compiled, but then you come at me with this 7th Day shit, which is like this pulp version where like the Nazis weaponized the play The King in Yellow, and a secret government organization started to stamp it out. And this caused lots of problems for our argument. As I was talking to Miles, like we're arguing that it only affects like these subgroups of people. But if there's a global effort to like block it from ever being seen by anyone, then obviously it pops up everywhere, right? Fortunately, I thought all of the works that mention the King in Yellow are canonical. They're all on the table. So in the mythos stories, the unspeakable one, whose name starts with an H, is the one behind the King in Yellow, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Delta Green, the spin-off role-playing game from Call of Cthulhu RPG, he is identified as just sort of a face on the cosmic principle of chaos. Okay, that's also canonical. In the Illuminatus trilogy, which you may have heard of, it's like a big kind of conspiracy book. It's a cult classic. He also appears in that, and so does the Cult of the Yellow Sign. And in the Illuminatus trilogy, the principles of Arisian Discordianism are the metaphysics of the universe. And One of the principles of Discordianism is that the imposition of order results in an escalation of chaos. All this is canonical for this match. Therefore, the Yellow Cross itself is the vector for spreading the King in Yellow in the Yellow Cross stories, is my theory. Their global effort to suppress the play is actually escalating the chaos that is the old one and causing all these global outbreaks.
Yeah.
So that's the theory. It requires a ton of sources. So much wasted time.
Wow.
I can't even believe it.
Wow.
I don't think that was time wasted because you just got to present that on this show, and I loved it so much when I read it.
I've always wondered the sensation of needing to make a sanity check in real life, and I think I am experiencing it as I speak. That is a heroic degree of bullshit, sir. I commend you for that.
Coming from you, that means a lot.
I have to say, I'm a big fan of the mythos as a whole, but the King in Yellow stuff is my favorite corner of it. I just love the idea of this, like, otherworldly document that can, like, let chaos and all this nastiness in. And I just love all the symbolism around Carcosa and, like, the Lake of Hali. And it's just so creepy. And I adore it so much.
Hello, everybody. By the way, we're talking about cosmic horror stuff.
Yeah, we are.
Chambers and all that.
The Chamber stories are good.
Yeah.
I mean, for the most part. I thought Repair Reputations is a little bit much.
Yeah,
And
no.
In the Court of the Dragon is boring as fuck.
Thank you. Oh
But
my
the-
God, Miles. Are we in agreement about the amount of
Yeah,
star?
we really are.
Oh, man.
I like the mask. I like the yellow sign.
Thank you.
The only thing I read for this match that was legitimately like scary or terrifying for me was The River of Night Streaming, which is not by Chambers. That story is fucking legit.
Yeah, dude. It's pretty rough. It's very, very dark.
Which one's that one?
Yeah, I didn't do that one. I just read all the chamber stuff. So
That's the one that I told you about, Kit, and you decided not to read. It's the one with the female
that's all you need to
protagonist.
say. That's all you need to say.
It is really good.
It is very good. It is not a Kit story.
Nope.
I'm still trying to figure out what the fuck happened in it, but yes.
I will say the thing that I was most impressed with when I was reading the chamber stuff was more so than anything that I've read from around that time period. The dialogue was really naturalistic.
Yeah.
I thought the people felt like people in a way that was not true of anything else I've read from the 1800s.
I agree with you about the mask and about the yellow sign. The other two, not so much.
I think that
Yeah.
like Chambers benefits from being a romance writer, right? That's what he's primarily known for.
Yeah.
Because that intersection with these stories that are clearly a response to like the decadent movement, that kind of stuff that was happening at the end of the century. It's like characters who care about love and like, oh, this girl's cute, but they also care about like, what is the point of it all? I think it lends a level of complexity to the characters that is kind of part of why it brought it to mind in the context of MST3K for me, because it's similarly, it's like dealing with a social issue of like, how do we deal with the torrent of nonsense around us? How do we find a value in it?
I also really love how like the entire like history of Hastur and the King in Yellow like idea, Chambers stole it from Ambrose Bierce, and then Lovecraft stole it from Chambers, and then like Derleth did what Derleth does. It's just a really interesting literary tradition.
Mm-hmm.
And we stole it from them.
That's right. We are continuing
That's
this
right.
tradition and sending it into space.
It occurred to me during the research that this episode is equally as canonical a story of the King in Yellow as anything we researched today. I feel really proud of that.
Hell yeah.
Absolutely.
Add this to the wiki.
After this comes out, if somebody starts to research it, our podcast is going to come up. I guarantee you in their Google search.
All right. So, a lot of times when we do these, I would describe that as going back and forth between things. This time was more just like I was in space, like the entire time. Just like, I don't know what to believe the entire time. It wasn't like I felt sure and I was switching back and forth. I was just like lost for a lot of it. The early image I got in my head while I was thinking about this was the idea that Joel's just a cool, like, whatever, kind of chill pothead bro who's like, you know, whatever, weird stuff happens, it's water off a duck's back. That was quickly shattered because I think him, the bots more so, but him as well, it soon became clear to me that there was something sort of uncommon about the way that they respond to stressful situations and bad movies. They kind of break with reality for a sec. They go on weird trips. I think the biggest question was, does that make them weaker to the influence of the King in Yellow or stronger? You know what I mean?
That's a good question.
I think I'm going to come down on the side of... Oh, gosh, it's so hard, guys. It's so hard. I think I got to come down on the side of...
I should leave all this in.
Yeah.
I think that what you might see as insanity is actually just a different form of sanity. And I think that they have unique tools to adapt to this to not only joke about it in the first half, but like sort of act it out and play with it and stuff like that. But I think that more so than anybody, because they've been through this kind of thing before, they're going to be likely to let it go. And geez, it's so hard, guys. I don't really feel certain about this, but I'm leaning that way. I think I'm going to give it to Team MST3K.
Okay, done.
Well,
in the books.
nice.
Can't change your mind. Got it. Okay.
Nice.
Congrats.
Well, if nothing else, Claire, you've just come up with our new tagline, which is, what you think of as insanity may just be a different form of sanity, which I feel like can apply to everything that we do on this show.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm just glad Chris's intense psychological research didn't go to waste.
Oh my god. I had to use interlibrary loan, you guys.
I would be lying if I didn't say just the amount of research that I could tell that you did. It was a bean on the scale. I will put it that way. When I was weighing the scale, and it was down to the last couple beans. Let me say so.
Well, that's because our opposition was fucking awesome
Yes.
and almost as
Yeah.
terrifying as a shattering play. So,
Well done, you guys. You absolutely earned your win. I'm very happy to lose this one to you because you definitely worked your asses off for it. So well done.
I also do want to mention real quick before we go into the kit thanks, the little MST3K riff that we did for our opening stinger. That's not all of it.
Oh, man.
So
It was very good, I want to say.
I will take credit for having the idea to do it, but it was written entirely by Chris, and he actually wrote riffs for the entire first act of the play
Holy
as it appears
crap.
in More Light.
Jiminy Christmas.
I thought maybe we could put that up on the website if we want to stop short of getting everybody together and just doing a full fucking bonus episode of it.
I mean, why not do both, man? That sounds good.
That's awesome.
Chris, you're supposed to have like a child that you're responsible for.
Oh, shit, I gotta go, you
this
guys.
is how.
Time for the thanks kit. Over to Twitter. Thank you to Sean Boyd, Earth Mofo, Cool Down Now, Jake the Redacted Jake, the No One Can Know About This Pod, Vander Turner, Jeff Rick Present, Florian, Cosplay Devotee, Cosplay Fiend, Icon Jade, Book Hoarder, 3 owls in a 2-piece dragon costume. Oh shit. Robert Ramsey, Matias Tatimez, Vladimir Duran, and Cynical Realist. Thank you, by the way, Cynical Realist, for the very nice things that you said about League. And on to Tumbles. Thank you to Changing Shades, Fat Blunt 69,
Fat Blunt 69.
Sid Rabbit Blog, Ink the Cryptid, Secretly a Skeleton, and Not Very Bright Raven. On Facebook, thank you to Jeff Polier and Robert Ramsey.
And thank you also to Kenning, who runs the Blockbuster of the Damned. Is that what I'm getting?
I was trying to come up with good, punny, jokey video store names. I said it quickly, but I went with No Soap Video, which is a pun on No Soap Radio, which is a weird, absurdist joke thing. It wasn't a very good name, but
The
yeah.
Blockbuster of the Damned. The store may be poorly named, but Kenning is not, I guess. I don't know.
Great.
Decisions have been made tonight and into the past, but one decision that's always a good one is becoming a patron of ours over on patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. As Kenning did, Kenning gets access to all of our bonus content, gets to be mentioned in our storyline on the show, and various other bonus options await you depending on what level you pledge at. So head on over there, check out what we have to offer, and join our cult. See that yellow sign?
The yelling sign.
The yelling
Dan.
sign.
I said it
Thank
very
you.
clearly.
No, you're right. You're
Not the
absolutely right.
thinking sign, the yelling sign.
Absolutely.
By the time y'all listen to this, I should have my latest bonus content up, which will be almost 2 hours of Bob and I talking about The Good Place. So,
Oh, that sounds great.
thanks again, Chris, both for suggesting this match and for being on the show. And I think it might be time for you to plug your shit.
Oh, yeah. I have 2 podcasts. I have the Gameable Podcast and Mega Dumbcast, which is a daily podcast. Every day we talk about another page of a Palladium role-playing game from the past, identifying the dumbest thing on that page. Both are on hiatus right now, but as we record, I am days away from returning to the studio to record more Mega Dumbcast, and more Gameable will be coming after that. So you can look up Mega Dumbcast. You can go to megadumbcast.podbean.com. or go to Mega Dumbcast on Twitter, which is a useful way to follow the show since it is daily, so you'll get the notification that it comes out every day. There should be a new season of Mega Dumbcast about Beyond the Supernatural, the very hokey paranormal RPG from Palladium, coming out anytime now.
Chris, I have long said, is perhaps the producer of the most perfect podcast content on the internet.
Seriously.
I highly recommend both of his shows. They are a
Like-
ton of fun to listen to.
The laughs per minute I have on Mega Dumbcast is perhaps higher than any other podcast I listen to.
There is one more thing we need to talk about. And Chris, I'm glad you were here for this incredibly historic and momentous occasion on the show.
Oh, no.
We have our second ever Stitcher review.
Oh, shit.
Oh, wow.
Oh, shit.
Number 2.
Yeah, so this comes to us from Grandfather of Machines. They give us 5 stars in a review titled, Zoinks, great show indeed. And they say, very briefly, amazeballs. No more to say than that. Amazing on 999 levels. So thank you, Grandfather of Machines. Your kind words are very welcome.
I'm really into your son.
Yeah. Who's his son again?
Damn!
Thank you very much for listening to this week's episode of Smash Fiction. Next week, it's time for a surprise party.
Smash Fiction is produced by Miles Schneiderman and production assistant Sharon Schneiderman, with logo design by Claire Mulcairn.
Special thanks to Kevin MacLeod of the Clan MacLeod at Incompetech.com for our theme song, Hitman.
You can find us on Twitter at SmashFic Podcast and search for the Smash Fiction Podcast on Facebook, Tumblr, and YouTube.
Subscribe on Apple Podcasts or your podcatcher of choice, and if you leave us a good review, we shall become more powerful than you can possibly imagine.
Smash Fiction is made possible thanks to our supporters on Patreon at patreon.com/smashfictionpodcast. Please consider donating as little as $1 each month. It helps us keep the show going, and we have great rewards and extra content for those who help us out.
If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other contributions, send them to us at smashfictionpodcast@gmail.com and help us continue the fight.
Scan the
Hey,
aisles.
Claire, just so you know, you're breaking up for me a lot.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Other people?
Yeah, same.
Yeah, for me too. I don't know that there's much you can do about it. Just be aware we might ask you to repeat something if it's,
right.
plot relevant.
Sounds
Maybe
good.
this is a cursed match and we shouldn't do this.
I'm pretty sure that's what's going on.
I've known that was happening.
Let all the fans of the Satellite of Love, whose minds have already been softened by
Kit, you cut off until you shrieked.
Oh, that's amazing. That wasn't intentional?
No, it was not.
Oh, I love it so much. It's staying that way.
No, she's gonna reread the last bit of her opener because that was not intentional.
That was a
but
good scream. But
It was a
was
good
great.
scream and it worked out.